Well, it's not a list anyone wants to be at the top of. Statistics Canada recently released its crime severity index, and Saskatchewan once again tops the country in most crime-related indexes. As of June, homicide numbers for 2024 have already matched or surpassed annual numbers from 2014, 2018, and 2019. Communities all over the province are grappling with crime, but folks in Prince Albert are demanding change after the recent murder of Trevor LaPlante, a beloved citizen who people described as a community icon. So what can be done? Today on Blue Sky, we're taking a look at crime in Prince Albert. We'll hear from the chief of police there, from an expert on gangs, and from someone in the community who says enough is enough.
Even just driving around, you can just tell people are upset with the crime. You go to the stores and people are like running in the stores, running back out. They're just scared all around because everywhere you look, there's something bad going on.
We also want to hear from you. Do you live in Prince Albert? Do you feel safe? What do you think it would take to see a reduction in crime in your community? Give us a call, 1-800-716-2221, or you can email bluesky@cbc.ca. Well, Trevor LaPlante has been described as a cheerleader, a selfless person, and a community icon. The 52-year-old was identified by Prince Albert police as a homicide victim around 2 weeks ago. He worked at a local McDonald's and was well loved by customers and colleagues. Jeff Parahudoff has also lived in Prince Albert his whole life. He says he's seen a change in his city over the last 5 years or so when it comes to crime and violence. Trevor LaPlante's death led him to take action. Jeff is organizing a rally starting at the city's courthouse tomorrow morning. That's where the man charged in Trevor's death is set to have his next court appearance. I talked with Jeff about Trevor and crime in the city.
I've known Trevor since I was a young boy, since I was maybe 7, 8. He was working at Burger King when I was just a young boy. And I've just come to know him growing up in the city, and he'd always be at the Raider games, or else he'd be working at McDonald's. He'd always be talking to everybody, making people laugh all the time. You could walk by him or be around him, and you could say Ric Flair, and he'd go, woo! You know, like he was hardcore into wrestling. You'd ask him what his favorite chocolate bar was, and he'd do the whole Wonder Bar thing. Like, I don't know, he was just all around funny, looking for a good time, wouldn't hurt nobody. I think he was a role model for me, for our city. You know, he would make people laugh, make people comfortable, wouldn't hurt a fly. He was really right into the Raiders. He supported them 110%. He was just an all-around genuine guy that lived in our city. Crime in our city is getting worse and worse by the day. This was a senseless murder. It didn't have to happen, so it kind of struck a couple nerves, so I figured, well, now is a good time to put a rally together. So I just went for it, and now it's becoming a big event, and I'm quite happy with the supporters so far. Even just driving around, you can just tell people are upset with the crime. You go to the stores, and people are like running in the stores, running back out. They're just scared all around because everywhere you look, there's something bad going on. You'll see people stealing bikes or going to people's yards and stealing stuff, or else you'll see people getting jumped or attacked. It's just becoming a everyday occurrence that shouldn't be happening. There's absolutely nothing being done about it, as from what I understand. We've had similar situations like this happen, and it just seems like it's being swept under the rug and forgot about. So in the last 5 years, it's really stepped up with the crime and the homeless and the drugs, the addictions. There's no support for that either. It's just getting worse by the day. I'd like to see more of the police force step up, more of the streets be cleaned up, people coming together as a community and keeping our vulnerable safe. You know, we got to do our part as a community also. I love my city. I was born here. I was raised here. I love my city. It was beautiful. Still is beautiful. I just think we could do some changes. I mean, PA is home. No matter if you leave or not, you always come back to PA at some point.
That's Jeff Parahudoff. He's organizing a rally starting at the Prince Albert courthouse tomorrow morning. Prince Albert police say 33-year-old Michael Bird is charged with second-degree murder and indignity to a body in the case. He is next scheduled to appear in court tomorrow. Trevor LaPlante was very well known in the community, including by Prince Albert Mayor Greg Dion. CBC spoke with him after Trevor's death.
Well, if I was to pick a word for him, I'd call him a cheerleader. And the reason for that is he's always at the Raiders. He cheered them on. And also, just a week ago, he sat right behind me for a week and watched all the games we had the men's world championships here, and he was there cheering away and stuff like that. And he was just a pleasant person. Like he wouldn't hurt a fly. And I think that's why our community is in such shock. I think what happened, he was probably in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the investigation is still ongoing. And of course, we probably won't get more details till a plea comes in or, the preliminary hearing or court that we'll know the final facts. But, at this point, you can just rule that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time because, no one could even figure out what he was doing in that area. So unfortunately, we won't know those answers probably for 4 or 5 more months till it goes through the court system. I'm just so upset. I'm so frustrated, and you have to control your frustration, you know. But where we're coming from is, and I felt this in the frustration for the last couple of years as I've been working tirelessly on the homeless addiction program and mental health program that we have. This, of course, is causing crime in our community. I've been working on it. And what people don't understand, the justice system don't understand the pulse of the people. The people have no issue with the law, but they want justice. And that's what we're missing in our society today. We have the law, but the law is not protecting us. So we're looking for justice. And that concerns me because sometimes when you're looking for it, you'll do something, you'll retaliate when you shouldn't instead of calling the police. But I understand the frustration because I'm frustrated. If someone could come up with a solution to deal with the homeless issue, I think that person could retire because I've been to every city in our province. We're all looking for the same answer. The government is, so the federal. What is the solution? Because at the end of the day, is it homelessness or is it mental health or addictions? It's such a wide opening there. It could be anything. But like every other city, we all believe we're safe, but we do have our instances. We're not sheltered from that. Do I wish it would be better? Absolutely. But until someone can come up with the answer for the homeless and the mental health and the addictions, we're going to continue to struggle the way we have. And it really came to light since COVID. That's when, because lots of these homeless people, before I called them couch surfers, they had a place to go, but then COVID came along and of course we had to isolate, so they got kicked. And then some of them and that's the problem with homelessness. Some of them are people with addiction problems that do have a place to go, but they won't go because there's no drugs and alcohol allowed. And then the other problem is mental health. We used to have places that we housed them, but the government felt that they had to close those and let them into the mainstream. Well, that's fine, but you had nowhere to put them in the mainstream. You took their housing away from the big institutions that we used to have, and you put them in the mainstream with no support, no housing. And so, I think that's part of the issue.
That is Prince Albert Mayor Greg Dion. I'm Candice Lipsky. You're listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. We're taking a look at crime today in Prince Albert. Our guest on the show today grew up there years ago. He worked at a community school with troubled kids, and that experience led him to research gang activity in this province. Robert Henry is Métis and is an associate professor in Indigenous Studies at the U of S and now lives in Saskatoon. He's been listening in and joins us on the line now. Hi, Robert.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm well. Thanks for being here. What were your thoughts as you were listening into the mayor there?
I think when we look at what Mayor Dion is talking about, it's the same rhetoric that we hear at every city. The blame keeps going to homelessness, mental health, not enough services, and so forth. And you see it everywhere, but it's more complex. Like there's so many different things that are happening here that I think we're looking for a silver bullet, and city officials are looking for this silver bullet or this magic pill that we can just give to every city and allow them to do that. And it's ignoring that Prince Albert has always been a tough city. We're just seeing a difference in this sort of idea of violence that's being done and the escalation of violence that is happening. We're also seeing de-escalation of services within the city. So at the same time that we de-escalate services, we see an escalation of this sort of violence. And I think that's where we need to start kind of looking at where are we willing to put our dollars in to support the city versus where we think we need to put them in. And I think that's where we kind of see that. I see a very strong pro-policing perspective from that, which is great. But the question is if your tax base is going into policing and not into the other pieces that are down or upstream from that, then you're just going to be getting what we're seeing happening and this escalation that's going on because the police can't handle everything that's happening.
We're going to talk a little bit more about policing and solutions a bit later on, but I do want to ask, Robert, if you knew Trevor LaPlante, the man who was killed in PA. Did you know him?
We knew him to see him, like everybody else. I'm not as well as others individuals, but yes, knew him to see him. Knew him. He was a face around the community. He's an individual that everybody kind of knows. We all have these individuals in different communities that everybody can kind of say somebody's name, and we all know who they're talking about, where we can find them, the sort of support that they have in that. And so Trevor was that person for Prince Albert for many years and should have been many more.
You grew up in Prince Albert, and you just mentioned there that it does have a reputation for being a tough city. So I am wondering what it was like for you growing up in Prince Albert.
It was fine. Like, it's kind of hard to say this. There was a reputation of being tough, and I think everybody accepted that reputation. But it wasn't. It was a reputation. Like, it was really sort of peaceful at the same time. I was never involved in any of the sort of the toughness that was going on out there, but you get that reputation when you leave the city. So you have the lakes, and you had people from Saskatoon or Regina or other places would come up there, and you say you're from PA, and they'd automatically assume that you were tough. And I think it was a badge that a lot of people from Prince Albert that would wear, that it would say, like, you grew up in PA, well, you must have at least gone through some things. And the problem is that that reputation just doesn't disappear. And again, I think you had that first interview, the first person that was talking there, they spoke about the pride that we had, that people have in Prince Albert. And I think that pride always stays there. Is like, yeah, you're from PA, people come back, we move away, we come back. It's a very prideful city. Everybody takes a lot of pride in being from there. But I do think there are issues related to ideas of toughness, hypermasculinity, that when I grew up going through high school and you would witness on a regular basis, that you saw it. And I do think that we've seen a ratcheting up of this sort of violence, not just in Prince Albert, but this is more of a general piece that's going on.
I'm Candice Lipsky. You're listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. We are talking about crime in Prince Albert at the moment. We got an email from Donna who says, I am old enough to remember when the pretty city of Prince Albert was always a stop to buy groceries before heading to Waskesiu Provincial Park. Now we make a detour so as not to be near the city. It's a shame that crime has destroyed such a beautiful city where people have to bypass the city just for safety reasons. Thanks very much for your email, Donna. And we would like to hear from people who live in Prince Albert on the show today about how they're feeling about the city. They can email us like Donna did, email bluesky@cbc.ca, or they can give us a call, 1-800-716-2221. Today on the show, we are talking about crime. There are cities all over this province, of course, who are grappling with crime. And one city in particular, that is Prince Albert, is grieving, is reeling right now. That's after a recent murder of a man described as a cheerleader who would never hurt a fly. So we are having this conversation about Prince Albert today. Again, we would love for you to get in touch. You can email bluesky@cbc.ca, or as always, you can call us 1-800-716-2221. Today on Blue Sky, we are taking a look at crime in Prince Albert. We'll hear from the chief of police there in just a moment, from an expert on gangs. And we were hearing earlier from someone in the community who says enough is enough. It's a conversation that many are having in the community. We also want to hear from you. Do you live in Prince Albert? Do you feel safe there? What do you think it would take to see a reduction in crime in your community? You can join the conversation, 1-800-716-2221, or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Well, our guest on the show today is Robert Henry. He is Métis and is an associate professor in Indigenous Studies at the U of S who looks into gangs. We'll get to him in just a moment. But right now we have a caller on the line. Kathy is in Regina. Hi, Kathy.
Well, hello. So, oh God, I'm kind of on a slow burn on this one, and I'm thinking about several different connections I have to this. At the end of the day, I keep asking myself, where are the parents? And that is not to say that everybody has a standard fixed two-person parent family thing. But we are also not doing that messaging anywhere. I don't see or hear it from social workers. I do not hear it coming from police news stories. And to me, it seems it needs to be a collective decision. It was really painful, but the comment from the mayor comes closer to anything else. And it's the kind of thing that we should be having a social conversation about and being introduced to in schools so that youth grow up. There is no parental training. So where do kids hear the messaging about what it expects to be an adult and to provide leadership to younger people? I'd really like to see a longer-term strategy that is intentional over a long term. It won't come to easy answers quickly. But if we start to use that kind of expectation again, maybe we'll start to put some more values back into things, and we will not always be playing catch-up for social problems that obviously had been dealt with in the past in other ways because of solid leadership of parents.
Kathy, really interesting point. Thanks for your thoughts.
Okay, bye-bye.
Robert, I think you are probably very well posed to respond to that take on things because you have and do work with youth. So what do you is this a parenting issue? Is this an education issue?
I think that's, and it's a great question from Kathy, I think, but what it does again is it simplifies it to this idea that parents are the purveyor of all of this, and it's far more complex than that. Yes, parents have a role to play, but that's the community as well. So if we only look at parents as being that rather than the community itself as that relationship, individuals who create the mentors and everything else in that community, that's where we can kind of get this idea of around maybe civic responsibility. And moving back that way, what is our civic responsibility on having to parent individuals, and what's our relationship that we have to our community? Are we closing ourselves off? Have our fences closed off our relationships that we have with individuals? I get what Kathy's trying to say is that we need to teach people how to parent, but were these classes ever in place in the past? And we're sort of shifting the blame onto these new generations and everything else while ignoring that the violence was always there. What we're seeing a shift in technologies. We're seeing a shift in substances that are coming in that are far more powerful that we're not used to. You're seeing drugs that are coming in that we never had access to in the past because they're changing chemicals and all of that. So that's a huge difference as well. We also have to understand child welfare, like the roles of trauma, child welfare, and incarceration within our families, and what happens with children as they get bounced around from place to place, and that psychological piece that's there. So there's a lot more to it. And I think if we take this idea of maybe parenting, rather than thinking that we're parenting children, but rather look at, okay, how do we parent our community? How do we parent everybody within there and make sure that we're together as a family, or understand this idea of relationships within our community? Might be a better way to look at it rather than just saying parents. Because again, that puts the blame on the parents and not on something that's happening outside the home. And I think that's where we can start looking at that.
Yeah. As you've been talking about, there are so many factors involved in crime, and cities and police forces all over the province are grappling with high crime rates. Of course, the death of Trevor LaPlante in Prince Albert has people questioning whether police are doing enough. So Patrick Noguet is the chief of police in that city. I spoke with him late last week and started by asking him about the murder of Trevor LaPlante and what conversations are taking place following his death.
Well, there's a lot of the community's been outreach and wanting to know just where does this sit in the realm of public safety. Of course, whenever you do have death in the community and it comes as a result of criminal activity, that has an impact. And people then have perceptions about their own personal safety. And we're doing what we can to try and make sure that we provide the community with as much information, knowing that there's a investigation in play, that there's charges in play, and there'll be court proceedings in play. But most importantly is making sure that the community understands that we're looking into the nature and circumstances of the event to try and determine where it sits in that public safety realm.
People in Prince Albert and cities across the province too. It's certainly not just a Prince Albert problem. People are worried about crime right now. I've talked to the mayor of Saskatoon about it and the police chief here too. What would you say to people in Prince Albert who are worried, especially worried about crime right now?
That we're, as an organization, that we're invested, and that we're doing everything we can as far as engaging with the community and getting a better appreciation for exactly what criminal activity we have in our community, in particular in Prince Albert. So we've been paying a lot of attention to crime severity index. Why did those numbers continue to go up? A steady progression since 2020. What are we seeing as far as trends? And then more importantly, what we're telling and communicating with the community is how are we responding? What has been our plan? And we're trying to do what we can to reassure the public that we do have an operational plan. It's strategic in nature. It's trying to determine exactly how we're allocating resources within the community. And we're trying to get the best return on our investment, because policing is an expensive venture in today's environment.
You mentioned statistics there, and I was looking at statistics from Prince Albert, from the police from in April, which was the last set available at the moment. And it shows that violent crime has increased pretty alarmingly in the past 5 years, as you just alluded to. There were 72 violent crimes in 2022, and in 2024, so far, already 141. Why the jump?
That's the part that we've really been trying to invest in. One of the things that I've noticed, and I've been here for just over a year now, when you include coming in as an interim chief and then taking on the full position. And that's the one thing that we need to invest in as an organization, is getting a better appreciation for exactly why crimes might be occurring. We don't have a crystal ball. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat this, but there has to be an investment on analytics. There has to be a better investment on making sure that we've got people that are specifically trained with analytical ability to try and provide us with some insight about why things are happening. Now, that then corresponds and relates to relationships on an intelligence front with other organizations, external, whether they be within our community, whether they be other law enforcement agencies that are in the surrounding area, but better collaboration and better discussion about, who might be responsible for the crimes that are occurring here. So our investment in 2024 has been in trying to get a better appreciation for just what's going on from an analytical point of view. And I'll give you case in point. So when the 2023 Crime Severity Index was released, that was only a week ago, and we knew that 2023 was going to be another challenging year. But once again, because there's specific algorithms in determining exactly what that number is, we wanted to know what were our contributing factors. So we did a little bit of a deeper dive, and we were able to determine that, the top 5, what were the top 5 contributing factors in Prince Albert? Break and enter was number 1. And we know that we've got to do a better effort at investigating break and enters, holding people accountable for breaking enters within our communities. Robberies was number 2. And third one was dangerous operation of motor vehicle evade police situations. And we knew we had a big issue in 2023 with that. So we've shifted gears. We've started paying particular attention to certain areas. And, I'm pleased to say that our numbers are very encouraging for 2024. So we're seeing a 23 to 24% reduction in violent crime in Prince Albert. We're seeing roughly a 4% reduction in property crime. And that comes, I think, as a specific allocation of resources here locally.
You mentioned the word investment a few times there. I'm wondering where you think the investment needs to be to actually get to the root causes of crime. This isn't just a policing issue, of course. There's other factors here. So where do you think that investment needs to be?
That's a great question, and that comes with the engagement component. And I'm not sure that's a fair question for police. My efforts right now have been on making sure that we are as effective as we can be as an agency responsible for responding to and holding offenders accountable for crime. And really, that's when we've been paying a lot of attention and spending a lot of time making sure that we are as efficient as possible. So the engagement component is how we engage with external partners then to get to the root causes, as you mentioned. And what I can tell you after roughly 30 years of policing is that we do need to smash the wheel and reinvent it, because what we've been attempting to do hasn't had enough of an impact to provide the public with some reassurances that things are going to get better and or change.
Do you have any examples of organizations or community groups that you're working with in partnership to tackle crime?
Yeah, we're really at the preliminary stages of forging good working relationships. And, that brings up a really important part is I'm done with collaborating. That's a word I think that is misused and thrown around. I'm looking to establish actual partnerships then with organizations here that get the job done. We can sit down and we can talk. We can come up with a theory about why things are occurring in our community. But at the end of the day, we need to have actionable items that are going to try and make a difference, knowing full well that some of them might fall flat on their face. But once again, we need to change the way that we're approaching some of these issues. And I'll give you a really good point, a really good example. When it comes to drunken disorderly conduct within our communities. We know that it's posing a problem for business owners. We know that it's posing a problem for residents. We know that it's nuisance activity, it's unwanted activity, and it casts a very dark shadow on a community. And what's been the response? Well, we know that for decades the response has been police will show up, they'll arrest for being intox in a public place. We will bring them into our facility. We assume all the risk and responsibility because a lot of these individuals are high needs, whether it be mental health, whether it be addictions. So we arrest, we remand, we release, and then we repeat. And, we have to somehow come up with a different mechanism to try to have a better intervention in that model because, time will show that it has not been a successful model to work from. So when I say forging a new partnership, that is rethinking how we approach these situations. So these initial conversations in Prince Albert, we're trying to spearhead them. Police cannot be the driving force. But when I say that our organization will engage, if someone comes to the table with an idea, a way of rethinking this model, I give you some reassurances that this organization will be part of those discussions. So whether it be community safety and well-being on behalf of the city, we have some phenomenal work that's being done about forging those relationships, whether it be with the Prince Albert Grand Council, whether it be with the FSIN. Once again, we're going to be an organization that will sit down and listen.
I'm Candice Lipsky. You're listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. Today we are having a conversation about crime in Prince Albert and what can be done to reduce crime and make community members feel safer. Before we get back to our conversation with Chief Nogier, I want to bring our guest back into the conversation. Robert Henry is originally from Prince Albert. He now lives in Saskatoon, where he is an associate professor in Indigenous Studies at the U of S. Robert, as you've been listening along, I spoke with the police chief there about where the investment needs to be in preventing crime. What do you think the response should be?
Well, there's a lot of red flags that kind of popped up for me when the chief was talking, and it's the same sort of rhetoric, this idea of analytics and policing. And this is what got me actually into my research looking at street gangs, is why do we label gang members as criminals or based on where they act and where they live and so forth. And when we look at surveillance and hotspotting is what they're trying to do, you're just focusing on poverty and racialized bodies. So we're going to see a big sort of shift into this. And these were policies that were done in New York City and other larger cities, like the stop and frisk pieces where they found that they were done illegal a lot of times. So these are some really high sort of things, and they're quick knee-jerk reactions to crime that I continuously see happening by individuals, and police seem to be the big pushers of a lot of this. The question too, he says we're looking for partnerships. Well, Prince Albert was the model for the hub model. So what happened with those partnerships? Prince Albert used to have a RIC committee that would bring all these individuals together, and the police were one of the formational pieces with all of that. So again, they've been going through and doing all of this, and it doesn't work. And like he said, we got to smash the wheel. Well, then we need to smash policing and what their tactics are, and start looking at it kind of from a point of view as he said, it's an expensive endeavor to do policing. Well, if it's not working and you want to smash the wheel, then how do we relocate those resources into something else that'll do it? He said there's high needs individuals. Police aren't required, or they don't have the ability to deal with those high needs. So let's reinvest in a different area. It's no different than anybody else trying to reinvest and saying we're not getting our worth out of here, so we need to shift our thinking in doing that. And it will take time. He even said it takes time for these partnerships and collaborations, but it's kind of interesting the way and the language that he's using. And I think in order to do this, and I know there's not a lot of time, but really I think it's going to what Jeff was saying and what the people are doing online, where they're coming together as a community and saying enough is enough. And not moving into a violent space of like, we're going to take our city back, but rather taking it slowly back, piece by piece, advocating for better, safer communities, understanding the police are a part of it, but understanding that public health and dignity and civil connection is really sort of, I think, at the core of what they're trying to do here.
Let's get back to the conversation with Patrick Noge, who is the chief of the Prince Albert Police now. We're seeing the opening of so-called complex needs shelters. They're more like 24-hour detention centers for people who are pose a danger to themselves or to others. We're seeing them open in Regina and Saskatchewan. Do you think that there's a need for something similar in Prince Albert?
There definitely is a need for something similar in Prince Albert. You know, we're a city where we have a lot of an influx of a population that comes to do commerce, comes to do business, comes to do recreational activities. We're that largest center just before you hit the northern part of the province. And, you know, we've got one street in particular that everyone is accustomed to. They drive through it every time they're going to cottage life, every time they're going up to a resort. They're driving through our city and they're seeing and they get from that a certain impression of what Prince Albert brings. We know we have to have a better impact there. So we are paying particular attention to what's going on in Saskatchewan and Regina with complex needs and how that's going to have an impact on the problems that they're experiencing in those two major centers. We're also paying attention to what's going on in our neighbors in Alberta as they try and work through some new legislation where, you know, you're not going into voluntary situations. Now you're going into a situation more in line with Mental Health Services Act, where if an individual is deemed to be not capable of looking after themselves, then, you know, you can make sure that you are providing them with an opportunity to turn the page. So we're looking at those sorts of models to see if something similar can be implemented in the province of Saskatchewan, and more in particular in Prince Albert.
You mentioned earlier that you haven't been the chief of the Prince Albert Police for an especially long time, but I'm wondering what your long-term goals for reducing crime in Prince Albert are and how you plan to achieve them.
Yeah, well, I guess we could have a whole show on that in itself. But you know, I think that what we need to do here is we need to make sure that we are as effective as possible as an organization in deploying resources. And that's going to take some time to try and really look at investments in infrastructure here that allow us to be efficient. When you look at our police per pop, we've got a pretty healthy footprint. You know, when you compare us, we're a population of just under 40,000 people. And you look at we're a service that has 106 sworn members, and with civilian staff, we're about 135 to 140 people overall. So, you know, we've got a fairly healthy footprint as a police organization. We need to make sure that we're deploying our resources as the best that we can. And that's going to take some investments in infrastructure, become more agile in what we do, become more efficient, increase the competency of the organization by allowing them to focus on certain areas, potentially reorganization. So the very first thing that we wanted to do was make sure that we identified a strategic plan that was based on, you know, some really strong items that we could, actionable items that we could identify, we could measure and determine where they're going. So we've got a 2-year operational plan that we put into play in the beginning of 2024. It's built on 4 different pillars. The most important one being community safety. We make sure that we have identified some specific goals and tactics within that pillar. And then the second most important one, in my opinion, is the leadership component within our organization, making sure that we're developing the men and women to be the next generation of police officers, to be more efficient, more confident in what they do, so that we're having a better response to crime within Prince Albert.
In recent weeks, we heard about some concerns about the relationship between the Indigenous community and communities in Prince Albert and police. How do you feel like you have a good relationship with the Indigenous communities in the area?
I think that's an ongoing process. I'm very pleased with the progress that we've had. I'm very pleased with the connections that we have. I think more so than now, like even in my career coming back from Saskatoon, the ability now to communicate quite quickly and quite effectively with senior leadership, whether it be with the Prince Albert Grand Council or the FSIN, for me on a personal level has never been better than it is now. And I think that speaks well for the future of that collaboration and that working together and forging these partnerships to make sure that we're accomplishing what we need to for this community in particular. So, but I will say that's not something that you can take for granted. That requires continual revisiting, making sure that, and it can be a very fragile thing, that can be broken down very quickly. So it's not something that you want to rest your laurels on. It's something that you want to continually work at. And that's something that I'm committed to doing.
Are you planning to work? You mentioned the Prince Albert Grand Council there, the FSIN there. So going forward, are you planning to involve them in some of the solutions to reducing crime and some of the root causes of crime?
Definitely. I definitely want their opinion on how they can contribute. I want the ability to use their resources when applicable, whether it be search parties that we've got set up, whether it be coordinating and communicating with family members, whether it be assistance on files that we're working on. I mean, there's just a lot of room for advancing the relationship so that we can find maybe some solutions to some of the problems that we have there. I guarantee you that they receive calls on a daily basis about the same problems and the same issues that we're experiencing for Prince Albert. And, they're struggling their head just as much as we are as coming up with a solution. So rather than work in these silos, I think it's going to be really important that we continue to forge these relationships and these partnerships. Some of them are going to take some time to work through. Some of them have some legal implications to them, legislative implications to them. But I think we really need to sit down and focus on what's moving. And I think we've started a really good foundation for that here in Prince Albert.
Prince Albert does have a reputation for being a tough place to live. Police Chief, do you think that's a fair reputation? What are your hopes for the future of Prince Albert?
Yeah, you know what? It does. And sometimes certain areas do get a stigma associated to them. I think that, as I mentioned, when you come through Prince Albert, you drive through one street when you're heading north, and we want people. And I can tell you, I didn't learn. I may have been guilty of it myself. I didn't come to appreciate what this city has with respect to open spaces, green spaces, and the glue that connects the community that really makes it a lovely city. And it has so much potential. When you look at the downtown area, it reminds me, it has the potential of being like a Canmore. You've got this beautiful river that runs through it. You've got the evergreen trees that are, and it's just this environment that is so rich with enthusiasm. But we have these issues that cause problems, and they're not issues that are unique to, as you mentioned, they're not issues that are unique to Prince Albert. We're experiencing them in Regina, Saskatoon, Weyburn, to a lesser degree, but these are all things that we need to consider when you look at Prince Albert in particular, because we've been influenced by crime severity indexes that go public, and crime severity, and thus the need for us to dig deeper into what a crime severity index number means for a community, because there's a stigma associated to that as well.
That is Prince Albert Police Chief Patrick Noget. I want to go to a caller who is on the line right now. Frank is in Prince Albert. Frank, what are you thinking about as you're listening in today?
Well, I'm hearing a lot of sugarcoating, and things aren't being said the way they actually are. I'll give you an example. Our mayor, he caused a lot of problems when he bulldozed the property, the homeless encampment behind the superstore. Next day, people were shooting up drugs in the back alleys behind my house here in the West Hill. You've also got opportunities that aren't being taken. The city had a property, the Marlborough, that was seized for tax purposes. They could have taken and repurposed the Marlborough into a shelter or addiction center, had a nice kitchen restaurant in it, could have been a share a meal, and lots of space in there for all kinds of services to be established there. They're not taking advantage of opportunities. And, there's all kinds of other things with regards to break-in enters in this town. You can call the police when you're watching mailbox thieves go into one of those public mailbox islands And it's just happening, just starting. You can call them up. 10 minutes later, the cops still haven't shown up. The guys can just sit there and do whatever they want. And the police don't even, I don't know if they don't have enough staffing, they don't have enough police, but I mean, we're talking about potential identity thefts and stuff like that. And there needs, with regards to that drug gangs guy, well, you know what? Carding would help, actually, in this town with a curfew. I mean, they put curfews in the back alleys, but what we really needed was a 12 to 6 curfew for the whole town. And the police could just simply, when there's someone that looks in any way like they're suspicious or acting in a way like, you know, just like in the daytime, when you see someone in the summertime and it's 30 degrees and they're wearing a hoodie over their head, a black hoodie, or they're driving down the street all dressed in black with one of those e-scooters.
Frank, yeah, I hear you. We're just running low on time here, Frank, but I appreciate your call. Thank you. Let's go back now to Robert Henry. Robert, you can hear the frustration in the voices of everyone we've heard from on the show, and I don't expect you to solve crime in Prince Albert with just literally a minute left. But what is your hope for Prince Albert? What is your hope for the community?
What I do hope for is that with everything that's happened with Trevor, that people actually start coming together and having these very hard discussions of what is happening in the community and what they want to see moving forward. I think what Frank just said when he said like the 12 to 6 looks suspicious, I think we need to really look at that is if we're a community, who are we excluding? What do they need to be a part of the community and how do we engage in that? Again, the whole reason, like there's a lot of different things happening, but I think if you look at creating localized services that are focusing on a social health perspective, I think that's a way to start moving towards an end goal that I think people in Prince Albert are ready to do. They'll just fight about where it's going to go. That's where the next place will go.
Robert, I really, really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Robert Henry is a U of S Indigenous Studies professor. I'm Candice Lipsky. You've been listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. If you still have thoughts to share, you can still email us bluesky@cbc.ca. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow between 12 and 1 here on CBC Radio 1. Until then, have a great day.